Hello there, Mad Mike here, and welcome back to the channel. Um, and today we're going to be doing a video that kind of sparked my interest because of all the stuff that came out about Zack Snyder doing his cut of Justice League. I was kind of curious to think about what other films maybe not necessarily deserve a director's cut, but films that I would be interested to see what the director's cut of the film was, or what the director's original vision was. Because some of them, they have rough cuts that exist, that the directors put together before a lot of reshoots and stuff were done by the studio. And I picked out 5 of them. Actually, 3 of them are Star Wars films, which just shows you a lot about Lucasfilm. But some of these are just for morbid curiosity. Some of these are just, again, some of these are legitimately, things that I would like to see because I think I would enjoy them because I know some of the stuff that's been cut out of them. But I figured we should start with something that a lot of people know, and that's Rogue One. So Star Wars Rogue One came out in 2016, and it did very well. It made over $1 billion. It was a success for Disney. I like the finished product of the film, but I'm more interested to see what Gareth Edwards originally had in his rough cut, because reportedly, over about half the film was redone and re-edited, and there were extensive reshoots done on that production. So we only got about an hour of what Edwards actually wanted in the film, versus a full 2 hour. He had a full 2 hour cut from what I understand, and apparently his cut was a lot more a lot closer to a contemporary war movie, which I think is something that's very interesting. But I think the reason they gave why it was changed is because they didn't want it to be as dark, and they wanted to put some more fan service in there. I know all the Vader scenes were done with reshoots, including the hallway scene. So I got to give them a little bit of kudos for that, because that hallway scene is amazing. But I'm interested in what Edward's vision was for that production, because it seems like it would be kind of it would be more personal to go into something like that, because they never really go into the war in Star Wars in terms of how it affects the characters, in terms of characters that get fucked up because of it. And I think that if you took a war movie approach to that kind of an idea, it could be very, very interesting. Especially if you wanted to, they explore it a little bit in the movie with Cassian Andor and Jyn Erso and Saw Gerrera and all these freedom fighters and stuff like that have been in the galaxy. So they have that a little bit, but I would like to see it expanded upon. So I'm going to put that on the list again. That's more of a morbid curiosity thing, because I do like the finished product, with the reshoots and everything. So it would be more just a compare and contrast type of a piece. Now the other one, which is also Star Wars, is Solo. And the only reason why I want to see it, and now thanks to Rated R Riffs, I have seen Solo, unfortunately, and I almost fell asleep by the end of it because it was so boring, other than that audio description thing we found on Netflix. But the thing with Solo is that it supposedly up to 95% of that film was reshot. Supposedly. That's why its budget ballooned into insanity. I'm curious what Lord and Miller's original cut of the film was, before they had the editors come in, before they had Ron Howard come in and redo pretty much the entirety of the film. I want to see what that cut was, because that sounds like an entirely different movie if you had to replace 90% or more of the footage that you had shot. So you literally just filmed a new movie with the same cast. So I want to see what that original vision was, because supposedly it was a lot more comedic. It was basically a Star Wars comedy, which I think is kind of interesting, and that's an interesting also little compare and contrast between those two, because Gareth Edwards was trying to make an emotional war film, and Lord and Miller were trying to make a straight up buddy comedy. So you had a lot going into that there's an interesting twist on it, because the thing is that both of those movies, it devolves a little bit into generic Star Wars. More with Solo, I'd say, than Rogue One, but it devolves into basic Star Wars. And we don't. The thing is, we've seen basic Star Wars. We've seen it for 40 years. Show me a legitimate comedy, not the holiday special. Show me a legitimate comedy. Show me an actual, like, gripping war movie with violence and stuff like that. Show me something that's such an offshoot from what I'm used to that is going to draw me into it. That's really what I'm trying to say. But there is one more Star Wars thing on this list, but I'll save it for a little further on. But the next one is one that I know I will probably never get to see. But it is one that I very much would like to see. And that is a full restored cut of Friday the 13th, Part 7, The New Blood. And the reason why is because this film, as John Carl Buechler, the director, stated, the MPAA raped his movie because they cut out so many of the gore and death scenes in that film. That film could be the best Friday the 13th film ever made if it was released uncut. Because the effects in it, because a few of the shots have made it online. There's one of the characters getting his head smushed by Jason. There's another one where Terry Kaiser, who plays the psychiatrist, he gets chopped in half with like a weed whacker blade. And it's very gratuitous, and you see his guts and stuff come out and shit like that. So, there's the MPAA cut it because the MPAA was going nuts in the late '80s because of the slasher boom, and because they wanted to. All the suburban housewives were bitching and moaning that all this graphic violent stuff was on television late at night, and their kids were staying up and watching it. So there was a lot of outside pressure on them, so they chose to then, go really hard on the horror movies. And Friday the 13th was one of, if not the biggest franchise at the time. Maybe you could switch it up for Nightmare on Elm Street, maybe at that point. But those were the two big names, and those were the names that they went after. And Friday the 13th Part 7 was unfortunately a victim of that. And John Carl Buechler, too, is an amazing special effects artist. So, that obviously went into the film as well, because I believe he was also the lead special effects guy on the film in addition to being the director. This is also the first film where you had Kane Hodder coming in to play Jason. And, you had a great setup between him and, Discount Carrie, the character's name is Tina, but basically she has the same powers as Carrie White from Stephen King's Carrie. She has the mental telepathy powers where she can, move shit with her mind, and a little bit of controlling fire, actually, near the end of that film. But that film has some amazing shots, including Jason on fire, and a bunch of other stuff, involving Buechler's specialty. The makeup, I think the makeup in that film is probably the best the series ever had. Maybe Part 4 had better makeup a little bit, or I would put probably Part 4 and Part 7 on par with each other, because that's Tom Savini and John Carl Buechler, so it's tomato. They're both amazing. But you look into what happened with Part 7, where basically they lost all the footage that they had that was cut by the MPAA after the film was released. Paramount Studios, who owned the franchise at the time, dumped they threw out the negatives at some point when they were cleaning out one of their warehouses. So the negatives for the film no longer exist. They are gone. So there is actually, according to the studio anyway, there is no way to restore the film for an uncut version. Otherwise, they probably would have done it right now because they did it to the original film. The original Friday the 13th. They released an uncut version. But the point is that there's always a little bit of hope in these kinds of situations because, they've had it happen with like silent era movie films and stuff like that. Somebody will have a negative or something that they don't know about. Maybe their father was an editor, maybe their father or their mother or one of their relatives was an editor on a film, and they kept some of the negatives personally because they liked the film or for whatever reason, and they just find them in like a closet somewhere 20 years later. So it's possible that something like that could happen, but it's a very slim chance. But that's Friday the 13th, Part 7. I think another one that I would really like to see, and I kind of did a little bit of break in between the Star Wars ones, is George Lucas's original cut of the first Star Wars film. Now, the reason why I want to see this isn't because I think it'll be good. I think it's going to be hot garbage. The reason why I want to see it is because I want to see what ass backwards thing George Lucas originally created before Martha Lucas re-edited the fucking movie to make it watchable. Because supposedly there's a bunch of stuff. I guess this was actually the version that Lucas screened to a lot of his friends, which included Steven Spielberg and a few other directors. And basically, they all told him, like, if you air this in theaters, you're out of your fucking mind. People are gonna be falling asleep by the 10-minute mark. By the 10-minute mark, it's not gonna work. And supposedly, I guess it had three Death Star runs before Luke finally sinks the photon torpedo into the exhaust port. And there's a bunch of random things that I've heard about it, but the thing is nobody can ever confirm it because nobody's ever seen that cut of the film. And I'm not sure exactly who would own that cut, if it would be owned by Fox, since they were the ones that were producing the film originally, or if that would be owned by Lucas at that point. Or if it was signed over to Disney along with the Star Wars deal. I don't know who exactly has rights to that edited version of it, because obviously that was the version before it was edited by Marshall Lucas, so I'm assuming that George edited that one himself, and then Martha came along and re-edited the film for the one that we actually got in theaters, the really good one, which also goes to show you, how a movie can be legitimately saved in the editing room. You can edit something so it's a jumbled mess that makes absolutely no fucking sense, but you can also make a really, really good movie if you have a good editor. So that's something I'd like to see, although that one I feel like is probably going to wind up getting leaked online someday by somebody. Somebody's going to get their hands on it and leak that shit. Now, the other one is kind of an obscure one, but I think it's one that a lot of people know, and again, this one's kind of a morbid curiosity thing, and that is David Lynch's Dune. Now, that movie was a colossal failure. Nobody liked it. I'm actually indifferent to it personally. I like the visuals and stuff of it, but the story is a jumbled mess. But the thing is that the theatrical cut of that film is 2 hours long. Now, the version that Lynch shot apparently was a little over 3 hours long. So over an hour of that film was removed. Now, just to show you in terms of, little things that can change a film, when Warner Brothers decided to do the ultimate cut for Batman v Superman, which is basically a director's cut, they put an extra half hour, so it's only 30 minutes, it's half of what would be put in with Dune at least, back into that film. Now, that half hour filled in about 6 or 7 plot holes that happened with that movie over the course of its runtime. And they fleshed out the characters a little bit better. It ultimately made the story better, even though the end of the story was completely stupid. It fixed a lot of the problems that we had early on in the film, where, one specifically that I remember was the scene where Superman assaults the terrorist base and saves Lois Lane. After he doesn't kill anybody, at least not that we're aware of, even though he sends a terrorist guy through a wall, which probably killed him. He doesn't directly kill anybody at the camp, but then afterwards, the bad guys, quote unquote, come in, or Lex Luthor's guys come in, and they kill everybody there with guns. And the first thought, and then in the theatrical cut, they cut and just go to the next scene. And then we're left, and then later on we hear that, they blamed it on Superman, that all these people got murdered. And in reality, that makes no sense, because why would Superman shoot people? Because they knew that they were shot. It wasn't like, Superman, if he actually wanted to kill people, he could just laser them in half, or he could just punch through their heads, or literally rip them apart. Like, it wouldn't be an issue where he would, unless he was like just fucking insane and he just started like flicking rocks with his thumb at supersonic speed and killing people. I could see that maybe, but not actual bullets. He wouldn't use a gun. It wouldn't make sense. But in the ultimate cut, they show that after they were shot, the bodies are then burned to make it look like they were killed with Superman's laser vision. And that makes sense. Whereas the theatrical cut does not make sense. So think about that. That's a half hour where you filled in a bunch of plot holes with Batman v Superman. How many plot holes in Dune could you fill in with an extra hour of footage? It's astronomical how much you could do. Because again, the scene in Batman v Superman where they explain that, it's just a little snippet where they show them lighting the bodies on fire. It's probably like 30 seconds, maybe. It might be a little bit more than that, maybe a minute, but it's a minute of footage out of that 30 minutes that filled in a plot hole. So, you know, if you could do that with Dune, I think you could make it a much better film. But again, this is more just mere morbid curiosity on my point. I have no real attachment to David Lynch's Dune. David Lynch has no real attachment to David Lynch's Dune because he hates that movie. Even though it was mostly probably because it was a living hell to actually get it made. But it's a movie that I think if he ever came back and decided he wanted to do a director's cut, I would be very, very curious on what it would look like at the end and if he would put that extra hour back into the film to try and explain some things. But being as how he's, he basically has washed his hands of that movie and refuses to talk about it, I doubt that will ever happen. But, that's just some of my suggestions for movies that kind of I would want to see a director's cut of. Again, some of them are possible, some of them are not possible or very, very unlikely. But there's interesting things that I would like to know, at least to see those cuts of the films and be able to compare them to the cuts that we already have. Again, like what we're going to be able to do with the Snyder Cut when that comes out in 2021. But I want to know what you think. Do you have any movies that you would like to see a director's cut of, or any movie for whatever reason, whether it's like I said, morbid curiosity of just like I just want to see what it looks like, actual anticipation because you think it's actually going to be better than the original film, or just do you want to see it just for the sake of being able to say that you saw both versions? Again, put your thoughts in the comments below. I'd like to know what you're thinking. Hit the bell for notifications, hit the like button, subscribe, and remember, I live my life free of compromise. Do you?